The emergency room was loud that night. Not the kind of loud that comes from chaos, but from people pretending they still have control. Monitors beeped like half-hearted prayers, wheels rolled on wet floors, and the automatic doors opened and closed, as if gasping for air. At 2:14 a.m., a young woman arrived on a stretcher, thin, trembling, wrapped in a paramedic's blanket that couldn't decide whether to comfort or confess. Her name, according to the paramedics, was Emily Ruiz, 24 years old, found unconscious in her apartment with an empty pill bottle beside her. The report said, possible overdose. Her pupils said, almost too late. We transferred her to Trauma Room 7, where the lights felt too bright for someone trying to hide. Her pulse fluttered in short bursts, a body still negotiating with itself. The doctor's orders came fast, practiced. IV access, oxygen, labs, naloxone. I moved in rhythm, my hands knowing what my heart didn't want to know, that the young rarely come here for nothing. When we cut her sweater to place the leads, a photo slipped from her sleeve. A small Polaroid, edges frayed, showing a woman in a nurse's uniform smiling at the camera. On her badge, Ruiz, M. I didn't think much of it at first. The ER eats sentiment for breakfast. We see love letters folded in wallets, wedding rings wrapped in gauze, childhood drawings tucked in pockets. But something about the photo, maybe the softness in the woman's eyes, maybe the neat script of her name, made me pause. As we stabilized Emily, the attending doctor ordered a gown change. Her clothes were soaked with sweat, her body still shaking from the chemical tug-of-war happening inside her veins. I reached for the cabinet of hospital gowns, all identical, pale blue with faint lettering from the supplier. But the one I grabbed felt heavier, the fabric older, the stitching uneven, the kind used years ago before our supplier changed. When I unfolded it, I saw it. A small white tag sewn into the collar, almost faded by time, with the printed letters. Ruiz, M. For a moment, the room shrank. The sound of the monitors faded into a single note that felt like memory. The same name as in the photograph. The same woman. I turned the tag between my fingers, unsure whether I was holding coincidence or a message. I glanced at Emily. She was breathing now. Deeper. Slower. Her lashes trembled. Not awake yet, but close enough to listen. I changed her into the gown carefully, whispering to no one in particular. We've got you. Then I hung her torn sweater on the hook, the photo still tucked inside. When the doctor asked me if she had family, I hesitated. Maybe, I said. But they might already know this room better than we do. He looked at me strangely but said nothing. Later, after the chaos calmed and Emily was transferred to observation, I sat in the supply room with the gown tag between my fingers. It wasn't protocol to keep it, but some nights, protocol feels smaller than purpose. I remembered the name Ruiz from somewhere deep in my training days, a nurse who worked here almost 15 years ago before I joined. I had heard the older staff talk about her once. Maria Ruiz, the nurse who stayed through the hurricane, who sang to her patients during blackouts, who died in a car crash driving home after a double shift. The gown I had just used wasn't just old, it was hers. And now, somehow, it had found its way back to her daughter. Hospitals collect ghosts the way old houses collect dust, quietly, persistently, without anyone meaning to. By the time morning shift came in, Room 7 had already learned to whisper. The monitors ticked softly, the lights dimmed, and the young woman with the trembling pulse had become part of the ward's breathing. Emily Ruiz slept beneath thin blankets, her skin pale but alive, her chest rising with effort. The gown, her mother's gown, clung to her shoulders like memory itself, a fabric carrying fingerprints from another lifetime. The tag brushed her neck, unread by her, but not unseen. I stood by the door for longer than protocol required. My badge said, "Registered Nurse," but some mornings it felt more like witness. There was a strange stillness around her bed, not the kind that follows tragedy, but the quiet that comes before recognition. Her vitals stabilized through the night. The medication worked. The poison retreated. The body decided to stay. But I could feel that the real damage lived deeper, not in the blood, not in the lungs, but in that hidden organ where guilt and longing coexist. When she woke, it wasn't sudden. Her eyes fluttered open as if testing the light, like someone stepping back into a world that might not want her. She blinked twice, disoriented, her gaze darting between the ceiling, the IV line, and me. "Where am I?" she whispered. "Emergency room," I said softly. "You're safe now." Her lips parted again, dry and trembling. "Did I?" I shook my head gently. "You're still here." For a moment she looked relieved, then ashamed. Tears welled up, quick and uninvited. I handed her a tissue, pretending not to notice how her hand shook as she took it. "I shouldn't be," she murmured. "I didn't mean to wake up." The sentence landed like a stone in the room's silence. The monitor beeped once, loud enough to remind both of us that life insists even when you don't. I didn't answer right away. The ER teaches you when to speak and when to let silence do the work. So I checked her IV, her vitals, her breathing, little acts of faith disguised as tasks. Then I said, "Sometimes the body knows better than the mind. It doesn't give up as easily." She didn't reply, just turned her head away, eyes fixed on the hospital wall, where faint cracks formed a map to nowhere. That's when I saw it, her gaze shifting toward the gown. She frowned, pulling the fabric slightly, as if trying to understand its weight. Her fingers brushed the collar, tracing the faint letters sewn into the tag. "Ruiz," she whispered, her voice cracked. "Why does this have my name?" I felt something twist in my chest. The truth pressed against my ribs, wanting out, but I wasn't sure it belonged to me to give. "Sometimes old gowns get recycled," I said, but even to my own ears, it sounded like a lie made of cotton. She closed her eyes, her breathing quickening. "This isn't random," she said. I used to dream about her wearing something like this." "Your mother?" She nodded, small and fragile. "Maria Ruiz. She was a nurse." The name filled the air like a prayer that had been waiting years to be said aloud in the same room again. I sat beside her. "I think she used to work here. Years ago." Her eyes widened. "Here?" I nodded slowly. "In this very hospital. Maybe even this same ward." For a long time, she said nothing, just stared at the white ceiling that had seen too many last breaths and not enough beginnings. Then, quietly, she said, "She died on her way home from a shift. I was 9. The fourth pump clicked once, marking the passage of a truth too large for words." "I remember her perfume," Emily said softly. "She used to come home smelling like disinfectant and vanilla. She'd fall asleep on the couch still wearing her badge. She said she liked hearing her name near her heart. Her voice trembled on that word. Heart." I looked at the tag again, at the faded letters. RUIZ. M. The stitching was slightly torn on one side, as if it had fought to stay in place. The universe doesn't use logic as often as it uses poetry, and that night it had sewn the two together. "She must have taken care of people here," Emily continued, "the way you do. Maybe she saved lives." "She did," I said. "I've heard stories. The kind that stay even when the person doesn't." She smiled faintly, her eyes wet but alive. Then maybe she's still here. Maybe she was waiting for me to come back. I didn't know what to say. Nurses aren't supposed to believe in ghosts, but we spend our lives with what the living leave behind. She reached for the tag again, her fingers trembling less this time. If it's really hers, she whispered, then maybe she wanted me to wear it, just once, so I'd understand why she never gave up on anyone. The heart monitor picked up speed, her pulse matching her mother's rhythm somewhere in the invisible corridors of memory. That's when a faint scent drifted through the room. Not bleach, not alcohol, but something warmer. Vanilla. Faint. Impossible. Real. Emily inhaled sharply. Do you smell that? I nodded slowly, goosebumps tracing my arms. Yeah, I said. I do. The attending walked in just then, breaking the spell. He asked about her vitals, her labs, her toxicity levels. Everything sounded stable, ordinary. But nothing about room 7 was ordinary anymore. When he left, Emily turned to me and whispered, I think she was here when I came in. I didn't argue. Some truths don't need science to survive. Before leaving for the next call, I adjusted her blanket and said, Rest. You'll need your strength. She smiled faintly. For what? For forgiveness, I said. It's heavier than it looks. Later that morning, while the ER rotated through its usual rhythm of injuries and emergencies, I slipped into the staff break room. On the bulletin board, beneath years of faded notices and emergency drills, hung an old photograph. A nurse in a crisp white uniform, smiling, with the same soft eyes I'd seen in the Polaroid. The caption read, Maria Ruiz, ER nurse, 2005 to 2008. Always here. Always here. The words stayed with me long after my shift ended. In hospitals, we save lives every day, but sometimes life saves us back, quietly, through stories we don't even realize we're part of. That night, as I left the ER and the automatic doors sighed behind me, I caught my reflection in the glass. Tired? Yes, but changed. Because somewhere between coincidence and miracle, I had watched a daughter wake up wearing her mother's name, and maybe her mother's courage too. By the second night, room 7 had turned into a small island, floating inside the noise of the emergency department. Outside its glass wall, stretchers came and went. The radio squawked new codes, and the automatic doors kept coughing the night air into the corridor. Inside, time stretched thin and quiet. The girl who had wanted not to wake was now watching the glow of her own monitor, as if the numbers might confess something. The tag on her gown had begun to fray where her fingers kept touching it. I checked her vitals the way we check the weather, not expecting change, only hoping the storm will move on. She looked stronger, the gray pallor replaced by the fragile pink of returning circulation. Her eyes still carried the tremor of people who've seen the inside of endings, but she was facing them now. Can I ask you something? She said. Her voice was softer than before, like someone afraid the walls might listen. Of course. Do you believe people can come back? Not like ghosts, she added quickly, but the way a song comes back on the radio when you need it. I thought about the gown, about the scent of vanilla that still lingered even after 2 air changes per hour. I think sometimes the world repeats itself, I said. It gives us second chances disguised as déjà vu. She nodded. Maybe that's what this is. Her giving me another chance. We sat there a while, the machines murmuring between us. Outside the curtain, someone cried out in pain. A nurse laughed at a joke half an hour old. A tray of instruments clattered to the floor. The ER continued its symphony of survival, and she began to talk. Slowly at first, then like a river remembering its course. She was everything I wanted to be, Emily said. Strong, kind. She worked double shifts and still made it to my recitals. When she died, I thought the world broke its promise. I told myself I'd never set foot in a hospital again. She paused, looking at the IV line taped to her arm. I guess I wasn't very good at keeping promises either. I leaned against the counter, pretending to check her drip rate while she unspooled the rest. Her story came out in fragments. The scholarship she gave up, the jobs that didn't last, the long, slow ache of loneliness that prescription bottles only pretended to soothe. Every time I tried to get my life back, she said, I heard her voice telling me to keep going. But I couldn't, so I decided to stop hearing. The monitor bleeped a small protest at her confession. I adjusted the cuff on her wrist, and the beeping softened again. "Looks like your body disagrees," I said gently. She smiled without showing teeth. Maybe it listened to her instead. Later, while she slept, I went to the archives. Hospitals keep records the way the ocean keeps shells. Billions of them. Few ever found again. After 3 wrong passwords and 2 calls to medical records, I found the folder. Maria Ruiz, RN, 2005 to 2008. The notes were dry. Attendance, commendations, a mention of bravery during the hurricane. Then the final report. Deceased, motor vehicle accident. But stapled to the back was a photo clipped from a staff newsletter. Maria standing in front of a supply cabinet, smiling, a row of blue gowns behind her, the same type as the one now on her daughter's shoulders. When I returned to room 7, Emily was awake again, tracing the stitching of the tag with slow circles. "Did she really work here?" she asked before I said anything. "She did," I said. "I found her record." Everyone remembered her. What did they say? That she stayed when others wanted to leave. That she sang when the generators failed. That she believed people could start over, no matter how dark it got. Emily's eyes filled, not with tears exactly, but with something heavier. She used to sing at home too. Old Spanish songs. She said music could stitch a wound you couldn't see. She gave a small laugh. Maybe that's why I came here. Maybe I followed the song. I watched her fingers relax, releasing the edge of the gown. For the first time, she looked less like a patient and more like someone returning from a long trip. "Do you want to call someone?" I asked. "A friend? Family?" "I don't have much of either," she said. She was it. And I let everything else fade. "Then maybe this is where you start again," I said. She looked at me, really looked, and there was something steadier behind her eyes now. "Do you think she'd be proud?" "I think she already is." The next morning, she asked for a shower. I helped her disconnect the lines, rolled the IV pole beside her, and handed her a clean gown from the newer stack. She hesitated, holding the old one with her mother's name. "Can I keep it?" Hospital policy said no. But there are rules, and then there are stories. And stories win more often than not. "I'll see what I can do," I said. She smiled for the first time, a small sunrise across her face. "Thank you." When she came out of the shower, her hair damp, she looked different. Not reborn exactly, just more present. She folded the old gown carefully, smoothing it like a page from a sacred book, and placed it on her lap. "Do you ever feel like the hospital is alive?" she asked. "Like it remembers people?" "All the time," I said. "Every wall has heard more prayers than a church." She traced the hem of the fabric. Then maybe she never left. Maybe she waited for me to come back so she could rest. I didn't know if spirits rest or simply keep watch, but I said, maybe that's exactly what she did. The day nurse brought in breakfast trays, scrambled eggs, toast, coffee that could remove paint. Emily ate slowly, her hands steadier than they'd been in days. She asked about volunteering, about rehab programs, about how long before she could go home. The questions themselves were proof of life. Before the shift ended, I slipped back into the room with a small envelope. Inside was the old tag. carefully removed from the gown. I handed it to her. "For when you forget that you're stronger than you think," I said. She turned it over in her palm, the letters faint but legible. R-U-I-Z-M. "She gave you this once," I added. "Now it's your turn to keep it." Emily held it to her chest. "It's heavier than I expected." "Names usually are," I said. That evening, as I finished my notes, a new patient came through the doors. Another overdose, another life on a knife edge. The same chaos unfolded: hands, voices, lights. But somewhere above it all, I thought I heard a voice humming, low and familiar, keeping time with the beeps of a monitor. When I looked toward room 7, Emily was sitting upright, watching the commotion through the glass, her hand on the tag at her chest, whispering words I couldn't hear. Maybe a prayer, maybe a promise. Hospitals don't do miracles, not officially. But every once in a while, they let you see how forgiveness looks when it remembers your name. By the time the weekend staff took over, the hallway outside room 7 smelled of disinfectant and possibility. The shift was quieter than usual, fewer sirens, fewer shouts, the kind of calm that feels like the hospital is catching its breath. Emily had been moved out of observation and into a small recovery bay near the nurses' station. Her color was back. She had eaten breakfast without coaxing. She had even laughed once, a fragile, surprised sound that turned every head in the corridor. She was writing when I came in, a paper notebook balanced on her knees. The tag from her mother's gown sat on the bedside table beside a cup of tea, the corners already softened by the touch of her fingers. She looked up, smiled carefully, as if afraid the expression might fall apart before it reached me. "I'm trying to remember a song," she said, "something she used to sing. I only remember the beginning." She hummed 2 bars, the notes trembling, unfinished. Do you ever have that? When the melody stays, but the words are gone? "All the time," I said. "Sometimes it's better that way. It leaves room for new ones." She nodded, wrote a line, scratched it out, wrote another. "I want to write her a letter," she said. "Not about what I did, but what I'm going to do. Maybe she'll hear it wherever she is." "You could leave it here," I offered. "Hospitals are good at keeping secrets." She smiled at that, the pen still moving. For a long while, the only sound was ink on paper and the muted rhythm of monitors in the next bay. Around mid-morning, the charge nurse called a meeting. Another overdose case was being transferred in. Teenage boy, critical, arrival in 5 minutes. We cleared space, readied meds, prepped the crash cart. The familiar choreography began. I told Emily I'd be back soon. She nodded, holding her pen like a talisman. The boy arrived pale and barely breathing. We moved fast. Airway, circulation, IV lines, compressions, a blur of blue gloves and red digits on a monitor. The code went on longer than most do. There's a point where everyone in the room starts bargaining with whatever version of mercy they believe in. I remember pressing my palm against the defibrillator pad and thinking of Emily's question. Do you believe people can come back? When the rhythm finally returned, faint but real, a sigh went through the room. Someone murmured, "Welcome back," the way you do to a stranger who's almost familiar. The boy was stabilized, sedated, transferred to ICU. The quiet that followed felt heavy, like the air itself had been used up. I walked back toward recovery, my hands still trembling from adrenaline. Through the glass, I saw Emily watching. She had left her notebook open on the blanket, but she wasn't writing anymore. She was humming, the same half-remembered tune as before, louder now, stronger. Her eyes were closed, her face turned slightly upward, as if following a sound the rest of us couldn't hear. I stepped inside. "You okay?" She nodded, not stopping the tune. I felt like she was here. I can hear her voice with mine. The lights above her bed flickered once, probably just the power grid resetting after the code. But in that moment, it felt like a breath. The air carried that faint scent again, the soft sweetness of vanilla over antiseptic. Emily opened her eyes. "Do you smell it again?" "Yes," I said. She smiled, and it wasn't the small, polite one anymore. It was wide, alive, the kind of smile that rewrites faces. "Then she's not gone," she said. She picked up the tag from the table, held it like a pendant, and started humming again, this time adding words as they came back to her memory. It was a lullaby, a song in Spanish about light finding its way home through the dark. Her voice cracked on the high note, and I saw tears streak her cheeks. "That's it," she whispered. "That's the song she used to sing when I was sick." I sat down beside her bed and listened. Outside the curtain, the ER went on, the hiss of oxygen tanks, the chatter of voices, the thump of a mop bucket wheel. But inside the small square of light around her bed, time folded into something holy. After she finished, she looked at me shyly. "Sorry. I don't know why I sang." "Because someone needed to hear it," I said. "Maybe her. Maybe the boy we just brought in. Maybe me." The nurse's station called my name over the intercom. I stood, reluctant to break the moment. Before I left, she reached for my wrist. "If I wanted to volunteer here someday," she asked, "do you think they'd take me?" I smiled. "They'd be lucky to have you." She exhaled as if setting down a heavy bag she'd carried too long. "Then maybe this place isn't where she ended," she said softly. "Maybe it's where I begin." That afternoon, while she napped, I found an old voice recorder in the lost and found drawer, the kind we used before everything went digital. I placed it on her table with a sticky note. "For your songs." When she woke later, she found it and laughed, pressing record immediately. Her voice filled the room again, halting at first, then steady. Around dusk, I finished my shift notes and stepped into the hall. The evening nurse was humming the same melody, unconsciously, caught by the echo through thin walls. It traveled down the corridor, weaving through the static of monitors, slipping under closed doors. Even the janitor paused, head tilted, recognizing something wordless and familiar. I turned back once before leaving. Emily was standing by her window, silhouette against the orange glow of sunset, the tag of her mother's name held up to the light. She whispered something I couldn't hear. Maybe goodbye. Maybe thank you. Maybe both. When I finally walked out into the cooling air, the scent of vanilla followed me through the automatic doors. The city lights blinked like monitors across the horizon. Somewhere, a song I didn't know played faintly from a passing car, its rhythm almost identical to a heartbeat. I realized then that the ER isn't just a place for endings. It's a place where echoes wait to become voices again. And sometimes, when the timing is right, they find their way through a gown, a name, and a daughter, brave enough to sing. Morning came softly to the ER, not as sunlight, but as forgiveness. The automatic blinds rose on their own, spilling a pale wash of gold across the tiled floor. Machines exhaled. Nurses traded reports in low voices, eyes heavy from the night. Every new dawn inside a hospital feels borrowed, an extension someone else earned while you weren't looking. Room 7 was no longer just another bay on the chart. It was a story the whole floor seemed to know by heart. Emily was awake early, sitting cross-legged on the bed, her notebook open, her mother's tag pinned neatly to the pocket of her gown. A plastic bracelet gleamed on her wrist. Discharge pending. She looked up when I entered, smiling in a way that made the fluorescent lights seem unnecessary. "You're leaving us," I said, and she nodded, closing the notebook. "I'm going home," she said, "but not to the same place. There's a shelter downtown that helps people get back on their feet. I called them this morning." "That's a good start." She tilted her head. "I wrote something for her. I want to read it before I go." She handed me the notebook. The handwriting was uneven, half print, half script, the kind of writing born between tremor and determination. "Dear Mom, you were right about the light. It always finds a way in, even through hospital windows. I wore your gown. I don't know how it found me, but it did. Maybe you sent it because I was running out of reasons. I have one now. I'll try to help people like you did, even if it's just by listening. I'm not you, but I'm still your daughter. And if love has an echo, I heard it here. I'll carry your name forward, stitched to my heart instead of my collar." She looked at me, nervous. "Do you think she'd like it?" "I think she already heard it," I said. "And I think she's proud." We walked together toward the exit, her small duffel bag slung over her shoulder. At the doorway, she stopped, turning to face the ward. "Can I give something back?" she asked. From her pocket, she pulled the old gown tag, smoothed it flat, and placed it on the counter beside the admission forms. "For the next person who needs to find their way," she said. "Maybe it'll help them, like it helped me." The clerk nodded, slipping it into an envelope marked, "Lost and Found," though both of us knew that wasn't where it belonged. Outside, the morning smelled of rain and coffee. Ambulances lined up like punctuation marks at the end of a sentence. She looked up at the sky, the faintest drizzle beginning to fall. "It smells like vanilla," she said. I laughed softly. "That's just the air freshener in the ambulance bay." "Maybe," she said, smiling, "but maybe not." She hugged me then, a quick, fierce embrace that said more than any discharge summary could. "Thank you for staying," she whispered. "That's what we do," I said. "We stay until you're ready to go." She walked toward the bus stop, her steps slow but certain, and I stayed by the door until she disappeared into the morning crowd. Back inside, the ER had already rewritten itself. New patients, new alarms, new beginnings. The gown tag was gone from the counter. Someone must have tucked it into a drawer. I returned to my station, logged into the chart, and typed the final note. Patient discharged in stable condition. Prognosis good. But before I logged out, I added something extra to the private journal I keep for nights like this, the one no one reads but me. Her name on the gown reminded us that some things never leave. They just wait for the right heartbeat to return. The daughter lived. The mother kept her promise. And somewhere between the hum of machines and the smell of vanilla, Hope remembered our address again. Later, during evening shift, a new patient came in. A young woman found unconscious. The same story written in different ink. The charge nurse handed me a fresh blue gown from the shelf. On its collar, newly sewn in clean white thread, were 3 small letters. RMR. The handwriting wasn't from the supplier. It was hand-stitched. I smiled without meaning to. "Looks like we've started a tradition," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "Making sure every gown remembers someone." As I helped the team prepare the bay, a melody drifted from down the hall, a soft humming, the lullaby that had once been only memory. No one knew who started it, but the sound traveled, nurses picking it up between vital signs and IV changes. For a few seconds, the whole emergency room shared the same rhythm. When the new patient opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was a line of blue gowns swaying slightly on their hangers, and behind them, the reflection of tired people still willing to fight for strangers. I think Maria Ruiz would have liked that. I think Emily would too. And as another call came through the radio, incoming, female, early 20s, possible overdose, I straightened my badge, checked my gloves, and whispered the words that have become the quiet creed of this place. Every heartbeat has a story,